Good evening. Good afternoon. We are ready to start week 5, and we are going to spend the next several hours uh, discussing marketing. And as I mentioned earlier today in my email, we will do chapters 13 and 14. Then I'll take a short break to record what we have, and then take me about 5 minutes, and then I'll come back and start chapters 15 and 16. This allows us to stay within the time frame that I have for uh, the lectures in case somebody doesn't call in. If somebody doesn't call in, I'm limited to 2 hours. I get cut out, and rather than do that, we'll take a break between chapter 14 and 15, and then I'll be able to get that all uploaded. But it'll be two separate uh, uploads tomorrow. So, pardon me, we're going to do chapter 13, marketing. Notice the subtitle, Helping Buyers Buy, and then we'll move to chapter 14, Developing and Pricing Goods and Services. That will be followed by distributing products, and then finally chapter 16, using effective promotions. So let's look at the learning goals for chapter 13. Define marketing and apply the marketing concept for both profit and nonprofit organizations. Now, we're going to talk more about profit organizations here tonight than we're going to talk about nonprofit, but they both do similar types of marketing. Although remember, nonprofits are usually talking about an issue or some sort of service that they provide to a group of people to help them with issues that they're having. We'll describe the 4 P's of marketing. We'll summarize the marketing research process. Very, very important when you're doing any type of marketing. Then we'll show how marketers use environmental scanning to learn about the changing marketing environment. Something that has to be done all the time because the market does change. People's needs and wants change constantly. Explain how marketers apply the tools of market segmentation, relationship marketing, and the study of consumer behavior to sell their goods and products. And then finally, we're going to compare the business-to-business market and the consumer market. One thing to say, the business-to-business market has fewer people in that market than the consumer market. So what's marketing? I think we all know what marketing is because we're faced with marketing on an everyday basis. But it's all the activities that are put together to help people make an exchange. The exchange is offering something of value to a customer, and then the customer is paying for that value that's being offered to them. And notice clients, partners, and society at large all are considered as part of this marketing apparatus, if you will. The focus today, notice it is helping the buyer buy. We know the companies have websites, we know that their blogs, we know their social media, and all those things are used by marketers to help people make a buying decision. If the consumer, excuse me, the word escaped me there for a second, if the consumer cannot make this buying decision, and we think that's kind of silly because we buy things every day. And we're going to talk about different ways of buying, and some buying is kind of unconscious, if you will. We don't really go through a thought process to make a decision. But anyway, if we can't help the buyer buy, if we can't help that buyer reach a decision, and our goods and products aren't going to be sold. And notice there that what the marketers want to do is they want to key in on things that will help this individual. best price, quality, value, whatever it happens to be. That's what they're trying to attract the consumer with. This is just one of those that I like to call a gee whiz slide. Look at what movie theaters provide. They get when I was younger, you went to a movie theater and you could buy a Coke, I suppose, or some other type soft drink. You could buy some candy and some popcorn. That was the extent of what you could buy. And some places was even more limited than what I just mentioned. And then that's all changed. You can go to a movie theater night and buy pizza. You can have other kinds of food, and of course you can take that into the theater with you in many cases. In some cases you can't, of course, but all sorts of different things that go into this, trying to get people in, trying to attract people to do something. You're buying entertainment. And what do we need to do to get you there to buy entertainment? You go to a baseball or football game, you're buying entertainment. And what entices you to be there? If you're a fan, of course, you don't need a whole lot of enticement. But if you're somebody that's kind of on the margin, you say, well, maybe I need to go see the fireworks display, or maybe I need to go get a hot dog or whatever it happens to be. Now, this is talking about how we have moved in the evolution of marketing. We have four particular areas. We have a production era. So, pardon me, you just built stuff and people buy it. Then we had the selling era, the marketing concept era, and now the era that we're into, customer relationship. Now this is the production and selling eras, and pretty much they follow along with each other. Production was, let's just produce stuff because the market's limitless. Well, in fact, no market is limitless. There reaches sometimes it reaches a saturation point, or in some cases the market may not be what you expect it to be. And then we had this production. They talk about here mass production. We turned then to persuasion, selling. How are we going to get people to buy? That was and this was after World War II. We had a whole raft of people who had been gone from the United States or separated from society, or let me not use the word separated from society. Let me use the word segregated from society, and I'll explain that in just a second. Who now came back to society, and society in general, in huge numbers. In World War II, toward the end of World War II, we had 12 million men in uniform. Now, I use the word men here not as an excluder of women. We did have women in the armed forces, but certainly not to the numbers of men that we had. And all of a sudden, when we had this mass discharge of people, sometime in 1945, after the armistice, not the armistice, the surrender in Japan was signed on September the 2nd, 1945, through beginning of 46, we had all these people were demobilized, 12 million people. And I'm only counting men. There probably were several 100,000 women as well. And these people needed to do something with this money they had. Of course, some of them weren't making as much money as they had, but then we had the GI Bill, we had all kinds of people going to school. So we had this, what the slide here says is the spending boom. And of course, then businesses knew they had to supply whatever these people wanted, had to persuade them to buy certain things. And this is where we got into this business. And notice what it says here. Responsive to the consumer, so he or she would be willing, if you will, to purchase the product. And then, of course, now we're into what we're going to find out in a few minutes that we're going to talk about is relationship marketing, which is a lot different than the other ones. Customer relationship marketing, you can see this on page 355 in your text, and we're going to talk about it here. It's a customer or consumer orientation. What this simply says is what the slide says. I'm going to go out. Now, we're going to get more of this when we get into market research. I'm going to go out and by some method, and I'm going to just use that term now, some method, I'm going to find out what the consumers want in one case and what they need in another case. Well, maybe needs not so much as want. And then I'm going to do whatever it takes to give them that, to produce that, to manufacture it, and put it in places where they're able to buy it. Then the next thing we come down to notice, there's 3 prongs here. The next one is a service orientation. That means that they're committed to customer satisfaction. And in fact, that many places will go beyond that, will use the term exceeding customer expectations. That means we're not only producing the quality that they want, but we're doing something extra to provide more value for that quality. And then finally, profit orientation. Obviously, you have to make money to be able to stay in business, to produce more goods and services, to do more market research, to find out what your customers want. And the last part of that was having the type of goods and services that customers want. And of course, if they want them and you are making them and you're making them to quality and you're adding this value, then you're obviously going to be more profitable. Now, customer relationship management, as this slide says, is getting inside your customer in some fashion. Now, obviously not literally. And figuring out what this person wants and then doing everything you need to do to satisfy and go above and beyond in meeting expectations. And finally, I'm not going to talk down here about farmers like too much about Priceline and Travelocity. But look at what this says here. Businesses are trying to establish long-term relationships. Now, and when I used to teach part of marketing years ago in a face-to-face class, one of the things that I would ask is, what product is it that you won't accept any substitute for? And various answers, and it didn't make any difference. There was no right or wrong answers, and I wasn't trying to put anybody on the spot. The thing about this is that if the manufacturer, the business, knows enough about the customer, what he or she wants, and they're going to make sure that it's there. That's why many companies use loyalty cards. A lot of people object to those because they say they're getting into your business and they're finding out what you want and they know too much about you, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't dismiss any of that. That's all true. But on the other hand, when a company knows what you want to buy, and it makes sure that is there on their shelves, if you will, and the quantities needed, that's pretty good marketing. So all that loyalty card is doing is telling the company in some fashion, hey, Joe or Sally was here today, and you know Joe and Sally bought this, 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 and this. But by the way, Joe or Sally bought something else today that they've not bought before, and we need to find out, in some case, if we can, if they're going to continue to buy that, because if they are, we're going to make that product available to them. So that's what this relationship marketing is about. This relationship era, trying to find a good fit between the supplier, the company, and the company's customer or customers. This just talks about something that's called service with a smile. We don't need to spend a lot of time here. This is a very, very difficult thing. People who are in the customer service business really have a hard time because there's an old adage that says the customer's always right. Well, in fact, we know the customer is not always right, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But we still operate under that law, if you will, and it causes a lot of angst with people. Just for instance, today I was talking to a person on the phone about something. My wife was going to intercede for me, and this guy had to know some personal information for me. So he asked me for something, and I gave it to him, and he says, "That's not what we have on file." And I said, "That's not possible because this personal identity that I've had for many, many, many years." What happened here was he didn't pay attention. And so, he probably was trying to do something else at the same time he was listening to me, and it wasn't possible to get what he had to do. So that's why I'm saying this customer service business is very difficult. You have to give undivided attention to that particular customer at that time. We see things here about building trust and listening and pardon me, showing appreciation, etc. All those things are necessary if you expect repeat business. And this, many bad things that are done is something that often things that the marketers cannot overcome. Nonprofit marketing a little bit different because notice the first thing they're into fundraising. They need to get funds for a number of things, funds to support the programs that they offer, and then secondly, they need to get funds for operating. They have people who work for them, salaries have to be paid, and of course, wherever they are, the utilities have to be paid, and the rent has to be paid, and a few other things. So they're into those type things. Other things they want to do is change public opinion and attitudes, and then, of course, increase the membership in the organization. That's marketing. A little bit different than what the for-profit folks do, but it still has the same principles. Now, these are just some strategies here that are mentioned for nonprofit organizations. And I really don't want to go into this a whole lot because most of what we're going to talk about tonight is the for-profit segment of marketing, and that's pretty much what we're going to focus on. But anyway, many of these strategies we'll find are the same for the for-profit companies. Goals and objectives, long-term marketing, finding out about your customer base, if you will, or your membership base, strategic planning, etc. This is just a thing about being green. That's throughout this textbook, and just ask you some pretty common questions. Now we're going to get to the 4 P's of marketing. Very important. I'm going to blow this up just a little bit so you can see this, and you can find it obviously in your textbook on page 357, figure 13.2. So we talk about here's the marketing mix for the 4 P's: product, price, place, promotion. So what it is we're going to buy, how much it costs, where we can find it, and then what type of promotion do we need. Okay, The very difficult thing to do is developing a product. Product is a good or service. It's an idea where we think, and we bring this out, I'm saying we being a mythical company, are going to satisfy a need or a want for the consumers. Test marketing is exactly what it says it is. You're taking a product or an idea or a service into a specific area that is designated as a test market because it meets a number of different parameters. A lot of times it's a cross-section of people. It's the dispersity of wealth or the broad spectrum of wealth. It is that would be from high to low, obviously. It is educational levels. It could be geographic levels. It's a whole raft of things that are taken into consideration to choose a test market. And some markets, some places, some areas of the country are continually used as test markets because they meet certain parameters set up by the marketers. Now, we're going to talk here just a little bit about brand name, and we're going to get into that a little bit more as we go through this this evening. A brand name is something. Here it says a word, a letter, it could be a symbol that differentiates a seller from all of his or her competitors. So when we hear the word Coke, C-O-K-E, we know that refers to a specific type of soft drink. And many years ago, there was a thing around and people would say, you want to get a Coke. They didn't really mean, do you want to get a Coca-Cola? They meant, do you want to go someplace to sit down and have something to drink? Often it was some sort of cola or some type of soft drink, but it was used in that expression. We use the word Scotch tape many times to refer to cellophane tape, when Scotch tape is a brand name and it belongs to a 3M Corporation, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company. So it just sets things apart. Now this is something that we really need to think about when we're in the product area, and notice these two are combined here, the pricing and the placing of a product. Now we're going to price depending upon what our competitors' prices are, and of course it's also taken into consideration here are costs of production, costs of distribution, or the ability to distribute. That would be part of it as well, and then things like high or low price strategies. Now we're going to talk about pricing strategies a little bit differently, but high and low price strategies are used to get customers in the door, and so that's something you think about. And then we're going to talk about middlemen. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into distribution. These people and talk about wholesalers and folks of that nature. These are important people in getting product into places because they are the ones who really have more interaction in some cases, not always direct, sometimes indirect, with the consumer. And then, of course, we need to promote the product. Now, I like to tell a story here. My dad told me this, and while I like to think that my dad didn't ever have his facts right, this is possible that he didn't, but this is a very good story because the first thing we're talking about is advertising. Dad told me that, and now, by the way, when I talk about this, I'm not condoning the product or the type of product that I'm speaking about here. I'm just using it as an example of the importance of letting people know about your product. And it is, I was talking about Lucky Strike cigarettes. Now, Lucky Strike cigarettes, according to the story my dad told me, was the leading selling brand of cigarette in the United States in the 1930s. And Lucky Strike was made by an American Tobacco Company, by the way, which is no longer a business. It now belongs to some other outfit, and it's something American Tobacco Company. I don't remember who owns it now, and that, of course, is irrelevant. But anyway, Lucky Strike felt that they were so well known, that the product was so well known that they didn't have to advertise, and they stopped advertising for a year. Now, you think about the 1930s, the only way you could advertise in those days, for the most part, with billboards, radio, newspapers and magazines, and perhaps movie theaters. And so they didn't advertise for a year, and they lost their #1 status. They fell to #2 and never regained #1 after that. It was out of sight, out of mind. And people didn't realize that they were still around. So that story, hopefully it's true, gives you some idea of the impact of advertising. Then besides advertising, we have things like personal selling, public relations, word of mouth. One of the biggest ways that companies succeed in selling their product, and then, of course, promotions. Well, the story here is, the slide says, perfect promotion. I don't know that there is such a thing, and I think most people in marketing would probably say there is no such thing. But notice what they're talking about here. It's getting customers to be emotional about your product. Now, I don't know if that's possible, but I know that there's some people that have certain passions for things. And I don't know whether that passion translates to love or not in this particular thing. But obviously, when you have people who can really identify, and as the slide says, in some emotional way to the product, you probably have them hooked. You have to have likable salespeople, and the salesperson has to have confidence in what he or she is doing, have to be interested in the people they're trying to sell to, and then obviously have to be respectful. Most of us don't like high pressure salespeople, but we do know salespeople we can relate to. Well, those that we can relate to, we usually have a better relationship with. This is interesting. This is talking about the web, and I must confess to you that I do not do much buying on the web. My wife does. I don't, and that doesn't mean anything. It's just not something that attracts me. I don't mean to sound like I'm a Neanderthal here. It's just not something that attracts me. I know you can do this, but I just don't do it. I do buy some things online. I buy books and things of that nature for my courses, and maybe just for leisure reading. These are some of the reasons that websites have problems. And I'm not going to go through all of this for you, but obviously the first one talks about the product not standing out. You've got too many other things distorting what you're trying to sell. People's eyes are going places you don't want them to go, and that causes a problem. And then if you have data from your customers and you're not analyzing the data, you're really making a mistake, because that should tell you what you need to do, how you need to move, how you need to change, et cetera, et cetera. And ignoring this information is just a recipe for disaster. Slide entitled Calling All Businesses. And it just talks about using social media in business and something that you ought to do, and some place that is a good idea for you to go. I'm not going to go into that too much, other than to tell you that social media is powerful. you need to know how to harness it. If in fact you're going to uh, want to use social media and use it as a marketing tool. Now, this is a very, very important piece of the marketing chapter we're talking about, helping buyers buy. And it may sound a little dry. Research tends to be that way. But it is very, very important because what it says is you have to find your market, and then you have to figure out what's in that market that is going to be beneficial to you and what pitfalls you need to stay away from. So notice it talks about determining challenges and opportunities. So you have to find the information that you need. And remember, until you make sense of what you have, it is just so much data. And you have to interpret that data to change it into meaningful information. So here, the research, notice the slide here, identify products that consumers have used previously and now what they want, what they're looking for. Do they want a new product and need something that's been improved, perhaps reduced in price, etc. Research also uncovers the way the market is going to move, and then perhaps in the direction it's going to move, and how it's going to change by its own demographics. These are the steps in the research process. You can see this on page 361. You have to define the problem or the opportunity that you have and the present situation. Then you have to collect the data. You have to do the research to find out what it is you need to find out. Once you have all that information, you need to analyze it and make sense of it so that it winds up telling the story that you're looking for. Well, let me change that just a little bit. Tell the story as it is. Now, you may not be looking for that, but you're certainly hoping for it to say something that you're interested in. Then choosing let me go back and not use the word choosing. Making a decision to do something, either to exploit the opportunity or to realize or see the challenge as it is and know from what you have found out that this is not an opportunity for you, that this is a potential pitfall, and to back away from it. That's why it's important to analyze the data. So it tells you what course of action you should take. If you don't do that, then there's just so much spinning your wheels, for lack of a better term. So now this is, again, we're going to talk about defining the problem or opportunity. First thing you have to know is what exists. What do we face today? Once we know that, then we can determine if there's any alternatives to what we see, what type of information we need to gather to determine what we want to do, and then how we're going to gather that information. There are a lot of ways to do that. Now, it seems kind of silly we would say that, but we need to look at that. The first thing that you can look at is something known as secondary data. And the beauty of secondary data is that somebody else has already collected this information. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, if you will. So it is there, it's available. Sometimes it's in records, sometimes it's in newspapers, sometimes it's a lot of places. Usually it's easy to get to, and it's not expensive to find it. It says it incurs no expense, And I would change that a little bit to say it's going to incur some expense, if nothing more than the cost of sending somebody to some place to get that data. Now, the bottom line to that is, or the downside to that is, it doesn't always have everything you're looking for. So secondary data is good, and many times people will use secondary data in support of the primary data we're going to talk about here in just a second. But remember that it's not exactly the most current information that you want to get. Primary data, on the other hand, is something that the researchers have overturned, if you will. Uncovered is probably a better way to say that. Discovered might be a third and even better way to say that. That is not been there before. And the marketers themselves have gotten this information. They've not gone to a library. They've not gone to the motor vehicle department. They've not gone to telephone books or some other sources of secondary data. They've gotten this information by directly contacting either customers or potential customers. And you can see the way they've done this: telephone interviews, online surveys, face-to-face, focus groups, etc. A focus group is a great way to get information, because you're getting a number of people who are interested in this, and then you have a person who is a group facilitator who leads this focus group through a series of questions and follow-up questions, etc., etc. One of the things I want to tell you about this is, if you intend to do this and you intend to use focus groups, you have to have a person who understands focus groups and who is a skilled facilitator, a skilled questioner, skilled at getting follow-up responses to questions that are answered and then answers that are given. Everybody and their brother and sister just can't go in and become a focus group facilitator. Okay, so now, as we've talked about this before, but we're going to say a little bit differently because the slide's here. Once we've gotten all this data, we have to turn it into useful information. So it has to be analyzed, and once the analysis comes out, then there have to be strategies based upon the analyses, assuming there is more than one, or there are a subset of the overall analysis. Subsets, maybe it's a better way to say that. And then we have to have some alternatives. We have to decide the potential consequences of each of the alternatives, and then decide which alternative is best to implement. And it kind of says down there in the last bullet what I said. I said it a little bit differently than what the slide says. All right. Now, here's the benefits of marketing research. And we need to think about a couple of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but a couple of these. What we're doing is, and the first thing is, we're analyzing. Now, this talks about needs. Let's expand it to wants and satisfaction. So then we're going to look at what is happening today and see if there's an opportunity. And then we're going to see how well our strategies to market this product work. And then we're going to analyze whether we can be effective or ineffective. Now, the last bullet says reasons for goal achievement or failure. That's an evaluation after we've implemented something. I would like to say we ought to analyze this at the first part and determine as quickly as we can whether or not we're going to be successful. Once this determination has been made, then we can go to this, and the decision has been implemented, Then we go to this evaluation stage and find out what we did right, what we did wrong, what we need to do to improve. Pardon me. Now, ways to find out what customers think. Now, we already talked about a focus group. And the focus group is something that's really great because you get a bunch of people together and you can, people tend to feed off each other in these focus groups. So obviously we can do informal surveys. I'm not so sure how much I like informal surveys. You don't always get what you want out of an informal survey. By contrast, when getting a formal survey, people don't always give you the right answers. That kind of maybe hedge on this. So some way of getting this in, listen to what your competition has to say through its customers. They're telling you this good product, bad product, some other kind of product. This could be improved, could be improved, whatever. Get the data, now hopefully information to your sales force. Another way to do this is be a phantom customer, secret shopper. That's known often. And find out what the story is. You have to know what the market environment is and these various factors that lead to success. We can find out about global factors, obviously, but let's just bring that back here to local stuff or regional stuff. See what influences technology, sociology, sociocultural, competitive, environmental, whatever they happen to be. We must pay attention to all of those because that's going to have an impact on what we do. And here's the marketing environment. And it shows you here the customer in the center. By the way, you can find this figure 13.5 on page 364. The 4 Ps, and then the different types of marketing in the marketing environment: competitive, economic, global, technological, and sociocultural, all having impact on your product, your service, your idea, and on the marketing. These are the ABCs of marketing, and it's something I don't always want to go through with each of those, but some of these are very important to mention. It has to have a customer focus. In other words, what's this product going to do for that customer to get him or her to want to come back to buy more product? But you're still trying to find out what his or her needs and wants are. Compare your product to that of your competitor. Known here, as you see, is benchmarking. And you want to pick, if you're in a market that has more than one competitor, you want to pick the top competitor and benchmark your product against that one. Improve performance. Notice the word continuously. You can't stand on your laurels. You have to continue to make the product better. It could be making the packaging easier. It could be making the signage or the print on the package easier to read. Whatever it happens to be. Focus on relationship building, which we talked about early on here. You're trying to build a relationship with your customer base to get them for repeat sales, maybe get them to go out and help you by doing word of mouth advertising for you, which doesn't cost you a dime. And hopefully you're going to be able to expand your market by that. The business-to-business consumer market, let's do the consumer market. That's households. And that's us that are not in the business market. And we have to remember here, we are people who have the resources to buy the product and have the ability to make decisions on what we want to buy and what we don't want to buy. Business to business is different because here people are going to buy the product to help in production. They may sell a rent to someone else. And so it is, but it does not go to the end user. And that's the key here. The end user is us, the consumer. Now, in marketing to consumers, we have to figure out what market we want to serve. This thing here called market segmentation. That's just dividing the market into various and sundry groups. Can be done by age, can be done by geography, can be done by ethnicity, can be done any other number of ways. And then the target market is selecting those parts of the segment in which you intend to market, sell your product. And notice that that segment, that target, okay, is going to be an area where you can be profitable. And some other target is not, so you're not going to go there. This just talks about how we're going to segment. I talked a little bit about this earlier: geographic, demographic, psychographic. This is a little bit different because now you're dividing the market or segmenting the market into things like group values, attitudes, and interests. A little bit different than what we've talked about before. Here's some more segmentation, benefit segmentation, and then volume, dividing by volume usage. Now, when you go to small segments, this is what's known as niche marketing. What niche marketing says is we're going to figure out a small but profitable segment of the market, and then we're going to go after it. And then one-to-one marketing is exactly what it says, going after the individual consumer. Mass marketing, a little bit different than relationship marketing because you're going after a large group of people. Whereas relationship marketing says the mass is not something that we're after. We're going after specific customers, and we're going to build relationships with those folks. Custom made. Here are the keys to successful relationship marketing. First one, most important, open communication. That means everything is continually being talked about, not being shut out, etc. Have to have an emphasis on relationships and providing good service. Trust, honesty, and ethical behavior obviously goes back to this open communication as far as I'm concerned. And then letting people know you care about them. You want that customer return. If you don't get that customer return, it doesn't work right. The local car dealership that my wife and I have done business with, and recommended it to any number of people. I know several people have taken our advice and gone there and bought automobiles and been satisfied. We got good service. This is how we as consumers make a buying decision. We realize we have a deficiency. I don't want to use the word problem, deficiency. We're looking for information that comes from the marketers, etc. We're going to weigh pluses and minuses. We're going to make a decision to purchase, and then we're going to evaluate it which means that the next time around we may change our mind based upon what our satisfaction was. This is how we make decisions as consumers. Remember, we have this marketing mix into the socio-cultural influences, psychological influences, and situational influences. Not going to go through all those, but it's something that you can see and something that you should take into consideration when you're thinking about these things. You can see it, by the way, figure 13.7 on page 370. Excuse me here, second. This is the, again, the factors in consumer decision making, learning, reference groups, cultural, subculture, cognitive dissonance. Business to business market, as we have said, is different. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. The B2B people are manufacturers, wholesalers and retailers, hospitals and other institutions, and the government. Notice that products sold in this market are often resold or reused to produce other product. And notice here, we talked about this just a little bit before, and that is that there are fewer customers in the B2B market. They tend to be large buyers. They are more rational and emotional because they're looking at this thing as, in many cases, a dollar and cents value that we don't as individual consumers. For instance, if you buy a car, we tend to do that based on emotion and not so much on because we're not thinking about dollars and cents. Notice here that the sales are almost always direct. And finally, promotions rely very heavily on personal selling. Now that brings us at 5:23 to the end of chapter 13. So let's take a break until 5:30, and then we will come back and do chapter 14. Thank you. How am I going to do that? Well, it's 5:30. We're back to conduct chapter 14, developing and pricing goods and services. I think this is always an interesting chapter because we get to look at some pricing strategies and have some kind of an idea of how pardon me, how companies and pardon me, how companies and marketers arrive at prices. So let's look at our learning goals for chapter 14. Describe a total product offer. Identify the various kinds of consumer and industrial goods. Summarize the functions of packaging. Very, very important. We don't think about it, but they're very important. Pardon me. Contrast brand name, and trademark, and then show the value of brand equity. And finally, explain the steps in new product development. Describe the product life cycle and identify various pricing objectives and strategies. According to, I'm going to read this because I want to make sure that you get this. According to the American Marketing Association, value is the foundation of marketing. And what this simply says is that you're providing quality. Notice that there's an adjective in front of the quality saying good, as opposed to a fair, mediocre, or abysmal, and that you're providing that quality at a fair price. Now, what I like to say is, and I think you may have heard me say it in this course before, and if you haven't, I'll say it now, and if I've said it before, it bears repeating. You purchase, if you prefer, what you pay for. If you go to a store that sells merchandise at very inexpensive rate as opposed to some other type of store, then you realize that for the most part, not always, but for the most part, the quality of what you're getting is of lesser value because you're paying less money. Now, let's take this, let's use an automobile. We won't get into anybody's, any store that's out there. You understand that if you buy a Cadillac or a Lexus, you're going to get more comfort in that automobile than you're going to get in an economy car like a Ford Fiesta that I own, or that you might get in some other type of economy type car that's made by any number of manufacturers. Now, the car that I have, the Ford Fiesta, I bought because I'd had a Mustang for a number of years, and unfortunately I had a single car accident sliding on a rain slick road and totaled my car, and I decided that because my wife and I had moved and I wasn't driving so much on the highway and getting good speed on the highway, and I wanted to get a car that gave me relatively good gasoline mileage. And I could have bought some other type cars, but I was looking for a car that would give me pretty good gasoline mileage in what I was doing. And so that's why I bought the car that I have. Now I realize that I'm not getting as much comfort as I would get in some other type car, but I'm willing to give that up for something else. So I got a value that I wanted, which was gasoline mileage, and I realized that I was giving something else up. Now I figured that if I bought a Cadillac or a Lexus, those cars really don't appeal to me. But if I did or bought another high-end car, I would be getting more comfort, but giving up good gasoline miles. So there's trade-offs, and those are the things that you have to think of. Now, this interesting slide here just shows products that consumers won't give up. And I'm not going to make heads or tails out of this. It's just here for you to see. Interesting, maybe not interesting, and we'll just go on from there. And then these are products that are considered to be expendable. Satellite radio, high-end cosmetics, and things of that nature. Again, not something I want to make a lot of heads or tails about. Now, this is what's known as distributed product development, handing off various parts of your innovation process to someone else. And notice it's often overseas. Outsourcing has created a lot of strange bedfellows where we have people separated by a whole raft of reasons. And there's problems with outsourcing. We all know that. You call customer service someplace and you're talking to somebody in another country that even though that person speaks English, he or she doesn't speak American English. Or they don't understand our talking. I have a very difficult time speaking to those people. I'm hearing impaired. I wear hearing aids, but it doesn't always help me on a telephone. And so I really have a real problem with that. I'm just talking about this as a general type thing. By the way, the slide you see here, you can see on page 379 in your text. It just talks about going someplace and how things are different for McDonald's and other parts of the world. The thing we're talking here about is developing what's known as a total product, and then it goes by extension to what is known as the total product offer. And what this simply says is this particular product, and we're in developing this particular product and then marketing it and selling it, you're giving the consumer everything he or she wants in that product. And this is not only are you doing that, but it's also what the consumer is doing is noticing here, and I kind of misread the slide and I forgot about this. Everything that the consumer goes through in evaluating to make a decision. That's what he or she is thinking about. And so they're thinking about all sorts of things. Obviously, price is one, wants another, needs another, et cetera, et cetera. And so, as we go back to the market research that we talked about in the last segment, this is where the marketer has to know what the consumer wants. So that is being delivered. What this particular slide says is that innovations come along regardless of economic conditions. These are all products that came out during the Great Depression, which started in late 1929, October 1929. And some of these things really, I don't consider the supermarket to be such a big deal, because we think of supermarkets as reducing the price or having lower prices, more quantity, and lower, generally tending to have lower prices overall than a normal grocery store, if you can still find one of those today. But certainly a car radio, really anybody in the Depression need a car radio? I would suggest they did not, although radios were quite common. And of course, they've been out before the Depression. A lot of radios were sold during the Depression. But that's a radio for the home, not a radio for the car. If you think about it, a car radio is not a need. It's a want. Now, I don't think you can find a car today that doesn't have a radio already built in. And you might be able to. I did buy one like that once a long time ago, and we wanted, my wife and I wanted a car that was basic transportation, and we eventually put the radio in. I would tell you that in a way that was a mistake, because the radio was never as good as a radio that came already in the car. But we wanted something different, and we were just after transportation. We weren't after amenities. Products replacing products. I'm not going to go there too much. It's something you can look at. Just understand that everybody has to be on the lookout, because what you're making today and what you're selling today may not be around much longer. This is what the consumer looks at in making the total offer, the total product offer comparison. And there's a lot of things that go in here. And you can see this slide figure 14.1 in your text on page 380. We don't need to go into this, but look at some of the things they're really out on the periphery. Price, brand name, packaging, convenience, those are all in the periphery if we're looking at in this thing. Whereas we look at things on the inside: speed of delivery, reputation of producer, guarantee, things of that nature. Quality and sustainability, certainly two things that we think about. This is just talking about a company called Trident Seafoods. and what they do to market. So they're marketing on quality and sustainability. Notice they say within catch limits and things of that nature to help the fish reproduce and stay at levels that are not depressed, and so that you're reproducing in the type of cats that you're using. You're only catching mature fish as opposed to immature fish. Now, what I mean by that is that if you don't have enough mature fish, then the stock will dwindle because the reproduction has gone down, and then you will be getting immature fish, and you keep getting immature fish, then the stock is going to be eventually depleted. Now, this is a thing we're talking here. It's known as a product line, and this is a number of products. It uses the term group here that are found in the product line, and they're all similar in some fashion. And here you have things like Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, Cherry Coke, all varieties of Coke, and they're all intended for a similar type market. Product mix, on the other hand, is something different than that, and that is a combination of different products made by the same manufacturer. And this particular slide here talks about Procter & Gamble, P&G, one of the largest consumer product manufacturers in the world. And notice here we have toothpaste, cosmetics, diapers, batteries, bar soap, etc. And so that's a product mix. It's all sorts of things that are made by Procter & Gamble. And they don't follow product line, although there are product lines within Procter & Gamble. They don't talk about detergent, but in detergent you have Tide and Cheer and several other detergents, all made by Procter & Gamble. Excuse me. Product differentiation. This is, notice, real or perceived product differences. And what the marketers do here, and this is interesting, and we need to kind of read through some of this so we can understand it. Use a mix of pricing, advertising, and packaging to create different images. And here we have things like bottled water, aspirin, fast food, laundry detergent, etc. Now remember, I talked about laundry detergent being a product line within Procter & Gamble, and each of those ones that I mentioned, well, I only mentioned two. They have others that I don't remember any longer. But they somehow differentiate themselves from each other so that you'll have people that like to buy Tide and other people like to buy Cheer. Tide has been a big product seller for Procter & Gamble for, I think, as long as I can remember. Now, there are four classes of consumer goods and services. And we have convenience goods, shopping goods, specialty goods, and then unsought goods. In the convenience goods, these are products that we find all over. We find them practically any place we look, and it's something we buy or some things that we buy and don't give any thought to the buying decision. Or if we do give any thought to it, it's minimal. Next we have, as we talked about before, are shopping goods and services. And these are things that we buy only after comparing value, quality, and price, and a few other type things. And some of the things we see here are clothes and shoes, appliances and furniture, things of that nature. Then the third category we have, as we mentioned, are specialty goods and services. And these are products with unique characteristics. And we won't find them many places. Rolex watches, Lamborghini automobiles, Ritz-Carlton hotels. Now, of course, that's a service, but we're not going to find a Ritz-Carlton in every city. It's just not something we're going to have for these things. Notice that not only do they have unique characteristics, but there's a brand identity to them. And then finally, the last category we have is, it didn't come up here, sorry. Well, it's not the next slide, it's the slide after that. Now, these are specialty foods for dogs and especially things for pets. And I'm really not going to go into that because it's while it's important and it's interesting, it's not really something that we need to spend any time on. And then finally, on-site goods and services, we have to have our car towed. We have to buy, we have to think about funeral services. We have to think about some type of insurance that we didn't get before and things of these nature. It isn't that we're not aware of these so much as it's we don't ever think about purchasing them. And we don't purchase them until we need them. And often we don't want to need them, but we have to purchase them. Now this just asks how you would classify how these categories would fall into the four that we just mentioned: Beautyrest mattress, Honda Accord, the Big Mac, Rolls-Royce, Oreo cookies, or Harvard University. Now it says Harvard University degree. Yeah, I guess that's a product in a way. And then these are some odd product ideas that were successful: Pet Rocks, Garbage Pail Kids, Mood Rings, Chia Pets, etc. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about are industrial goods and services. And these are the products we find in the business-to-business market. And so industrial goods, and we talked about installations, capital items, supplies, services, etc. Remember, these are not things that are sold to the consumer for the most part, because the consumer products are for the end user. In business-to-business market, remember, they're going to use them to manufacture other products, sometimes to resell product, or to use them for themselves, but it's not considered to be to the end user. Now, the next thing we come to here is uses of packaging. Now, one of the things we have to think about packaging is that it does attract us. And in some cases, it improves the product. And we know that good packaging is something that is needed to help protect the product in some cases. So let's look at why we have packaging, what the uses for packaging are. I mentioned we want to get somebody's attention. And so we have something that stands out. One of the things it says here, and I sometimes think that this is not true, is it has to be easy to open. And a lot of times it's not. Gives us information on what the contents of the packaging is, or what the package is, or contents are. And then sometimes we're talking about food, it gives nutrition, so it gives information and things of that nature. It may tell us what the benefits of the product is. Obviously, there may be some warnings and something about warranty, and then usually tells us something about price and its value, etc. You know, if you go to a supermarket and you buy something, they'll tell you how much you're paying per ounce, maybe how much you're paying per pound, etc. So that's some of the things that why we have packaging and the reasons that packaging is around. Bundling is grouping two or more products together and then pricing them as a unit. Often these are dissimilar products. Here they talk about Virgin Airlines bundles door-to-door service. Financial institutions bundle advice with purchases. Things of that nature. Now, this is something that I think is very important for all of us to think about, and that is brands, brand equity, and trademark. We talked about a brand before. Notice that, again, it's a name or a symbol that we associate with a specific product, or in some cases with a line of products. Now, the brand tries to do something that identifies the particular product and then differentiates it in some way from its competitors. A trademark is a brand that has legal protection, and they are allowed to use this particular symbol, name, etc. And anybody else who gets into that is running into problems. Now, I guess my favorite example of that is Victoria's Secret, which, as you know, sells lingerie for women. And there was a company in, I'm pretty sure, Louisville, Kentucky. It was known as Victor's Little Secret. And Victoria's Secret sued them for trademark infringement. And they won. And what they simply said was cease and desist using that name, which makes people think it's the same as Victoria's Secret. This is a name game. I'm not going to talk to you too much about this. This is one of those slides. It's just interesting to see and doesn't require much information. And this again goes along here. Different things about how names got to be where they are, and why they were stuck where they were. Key brands and key brand categories. And we have things like manufacturers' brands. These are products we find that are distributed nationally. Then we have things called dealer or private brands. These are products that carry a retailer's name, but they're manufactured by someone else. So I can't think of one right off the bat, which would be everybody would know. But it's a product that's made by someone else, but it carries a different name. Generic goods. These are products that don't have brand names and are sold at a discount when compared to either manufacturer or dealers. And the knockoffs are exactly what they say. Keyword, knockoff is illegal. You can go up to Times Square in New York and people are trying to sell you Rolex watches for $100. This is something that companies always want to do. And they want to do two things. They want to establish brand equity and then brand loyalty. Brand equity is the value of the brand name and its associated symbols. So there's money attached to that, or a money category attached to that. How much is that brand name worth? That's the equity piece. And the brand loyalty is just how often people are going to insist upon purchasing that particular product and take no substitute. And that they will continue doing that time after time after time after time. Now, we find that brand loyalty is not quite as high in the United States as it once was. These are the most valuable brands. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is the brand. The name is associated here. What's the value associated with the name? Excuse me, I went to the wrong slide or somehow. Yeah, I sure did. Now these are just origins of symbols. How they got to be where they are. Now I want to spend a lot of time on that. This is something that companies try to do, and they're trying to build brand awareness. So what they're doing there is how quickly they're trying to instill a message and imprint the message on the consumer's brain, if you will, and how quickly that they can recall that. So it's not a memory game. It's trying to embed this image within the consumer's mind, imprinted, as I said before. So there's kind of like instant recall. And somebody will mention a category like soft drink and say Coca-Cola. Maybe someone else would say Pepsi-Cola. So that's what that's trying to do. And the brand preference is exactly what it says. I'm not going to take a substitute. That goes back to this brand awareness in a way, but that's what I want. I'm not going to take a substitute on this thing. And it comes down to that's brand preference. Now, when you get the brand insistence, that means there are no substitutes. I won't take a substitute. So brand preference, I want this brand as opposed to that brand. I most often want this brand. I may take this brand, but I really don't want it. But when I get the brand insistence, it's only this brand I want. You cannot give me another brand. Well, you can give it to me. I don't want it. So we have a couple things going here. Brand association. Notice here you have familiar characters. I like to use that term. Maybe actors, actresses, other people in the public view who are somehow associated with a particular product. I can't think of anything right off the bat, but I'm sure you probably can. A brand manager is a person who manages that brand, and he or she does all the things necessary to keep the brand where it should be, and part of the marketing mix, etc. Every large company that has a number of products that it sells and they are brands have brand managers. Now this is the new product development process. I'm blow this up just a little bit for you so you can see a little bit better. It doesn't look real well, but we'll start and come down. You can see this graphically displayed at page 391, figure 14.3. Starts out with an idea. And then once the idea is developed, and so we have some type of a prototype, if you will, then we have come to product screening. And what this just means is we have a number of new products coming out and are vying for attention, if you will. How many of these are going to work on at the same time? And so you can look at this not only a screening here, but a sifting, probably, if you will. And so we're going to figure out what we're going to do here. Then we go to product analysis. Pretty simple. What's it going to cost us to make this thing? Do we have some kind of an idea if there'd be a profit? What can we do with it? Et cetera, et cetera. So once we get a pretty good idea about this, then we're going to go to developing the product. Now, remember before I did talk about prototype. So in this case, we're going to have to, something was going to be built so people could look at it and get some kind of an idea what it's going to look like. Now, when we come down here to this prototype, we're now talking about building, pardon me, a working model. So it's a working prototype. So we get some kind of an idea how this thing is going to operate. Obviously, we're going to test it. That testing may be done in a focus group. It may be done in a test market. It may be done a number of different things to see if it's going to do what we think it's going to do. And then we're going to decide, based upon all the information we gathered at these steps, whether or not we're going to bring the product to the market. And then here we're talking about some of the steps we talked about before: product screening, product analysis. This is just giving us a little bit more graphically displayed here than what I meant before, and deciding, yeah, no, let's kill it, take our losses, and stop, etc. This is talking about the popularity of food trucks in different areas. Again, something I really don't want to talk about a whole lot. Just interesting slide, but not something we need to really discuss. We're next going to get into a very serious thing for businesses, and this is understanding the product life cycle. Notice we have 4 categories here: introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Now you can see the product life cycle, figure 14.4 on page 393, and we're going to bring it up here in the next slide. And we're going to move this down just a little bit. Introduction on the left side, decline on the right side. Now we have to remember one thing at the very beginning here. Every product doesn't go through this cycle where it comes to introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Some stay in this maturity area for a long period of time. But what we're talking here about is, and I think this is a good way to go here, electric cars for the most part are, even though we had electric cars in the United States back in the early 1900s, they went out of style because they weren't reliable, for one thing, and gasoline was inexpensive. Maybe cheap's a better word. So there are introductions, and where we have hybrid cars are now in a growth area. So we have to ask ourselves a question here when we look at this. Are the all-electric cars eventually going to overtake the hybrid cars, or are the hybrid cars going to go to maturity and then eventually to decline? I don't know the answer to that. The consumer, you and I, we're going to make that decision sooner or later. Now, some of you are going to be around a little bit longer than I am, and you'll know what that decision is going to be. So we see these things, and then we see things here as we move up the line, and eventually we go into decline. Certainly, video cassette recorders are in decline. SUVs that seem like were in decline, but I'm not sure that they fall into decline today. I think they're kind of at the bubble. We may find them going to decline soon, but I don't think they're in decline right now, at least not from the latest sales figures that I've been able to see. Oh, this is just talking about people still earning money after they've left Earth. That's not something we want to talk about too much. Now, this particular slide talks about pricing objectives. And I think we need to think about some of these in a way. So one is a good return on our investment. Build traffic, get people to come in to buy this product and maybe perhaps buy some other product. Creating an image, getting greater market share, perhaps furthering social objectives. We need to look at all of these things as what we're talking about here, pricing objectives. Now, there's a number of ways to do this. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit here. Cost-based pricing, that means what it cost you, and then adding something onto that to make a profit. Target costing, here notice this is a little bit different. Designing a product that satisfies customers and then it meets the firm's profit objectives, so profit margin. And then competition-based pricing, obviously you're finding out what your competition is charging, and then you're doing one of several things. You're going to, one, meet that, so in other words, me too, if you will. Two, you're going to price a little bit less to try to drive business. Or three, you might price a little bit more and say, my quality's better. Possibility. Break-even analysis is exactly what it says, and we can't change that any. It's just we're determining profitability at various levels of sales, and when we're at break-even, that means our revenue coming in equals our cost. Now, you can't stay at break-even all the time. Stay at break-even. It's not going to get you anyplace. But you may want to be break even on this product and then sell a little bit higher on some other product, depending upon what your strategy is. There's some things we need to think about. One is fixed costs. Fixed cost means this is what it's going to cost me to either turn the key to open the door or not to turn the key to open the door. And fixed costs are things like rent, utilities, things of that nature. Those are fixed costs. Variable costs, notice here, are going to change according to our production level. Several pricing strategies here. Skimming, that means you're getting in and you're setting the price high enough to get all the profits out that you can get out before you get competition. So you're getting in there, you're setting the rate, you're able to recover everything that you need to recover, and you're able to do this because you don't have any competition. Penetration price is exactly what it says. I'm going to set my price low enough that I'm going to be able to get in the market. And then I'll do whatever I need to do after I'm in the market. And of course, if I'm large enough, I may keep competitors out because of my price. It's a penetration price. I want to get into the market. Now, this is something that a lot of small businesses have difficulty understanding. They believe the only way for me to get into the market is to have a low price. And so they get into the market with a low price, and then they can't make any money. And the problem with that strategy is you go in with a low price, you cannot raise your price. Now, yeah, somebody's going to tell me, oh, well, yeah, prices raise over. Yeah, that's true. but you may have to wait a year or two before you can raise that price. You may not be able to survive that long. So you have to get something when you get into the market. The price is important, but if you're a small business, you have to have something that sets you apart from the big guys and big gals. Otherwise, if you're just going on price for a long period of time, you're not going to survive. Now, I'll give you a classic example. I lived in Newport News, Virginia, when I was in the Army. That's the last place I lived while I was still in the Army. And when you crossed I-64, you went from Newport News into York County. And right as we got into York County, there was a shopping mall that was anchored by a large Kmart store and a few other, and it had a few other stores. Kmart was the major tenant. Now, as you looked catty corner across I-64, there was a new, back over Newport News, there was a new shopping center going up and had a Barnes & Noble in it, and I've forgotten what else, but Barnes & Noble is what I want to talk about. And in this shopping center I'm talking about in York County, there was a retired military officer who opened up a bookstore called the Sandpiper. And I guess it was reasonably successful. And then this other mall sort of diagonal across I-64, but over in Newport News, where this huge Barnes & Noble was. And somebody asked this fellow, so aren't you concerned about Barnes & Noble? He said, no, I'm going to compete with Barnes & Noble. Well, I think 6 to 9 months later, after Barnes & Noble opened, he was out of business. Now over in Norfolk, which was about 30 or so miles east of where I live, there was a Barnes & Noble over there, and there was a woman who had a small bookstore, and she realized pretty quickly that she could not compete with Barnes & Noble. And so she specialized, and she sold children's books. And she specialized on children's books, which was not a big area for Barnes & Noble. And she became so successful at her little niche, her niche market, selling children's books, that when people came to Barnes & Noble look for children's books and couldn't find them, the Barnes & Noble people would send her there, send the customers to this woman. So here are two stories, two bookstores. One says, I'm going to compete with the big guys, gone in 6 to 9 months. And a woman who may have had a store as smaller than the one I was talking about, realized she couldn't compete, specialized, and was successful. Last I know, she was still in business. Everyday low prices. We know that there are retailers that do this, and they say, here are our prices are low, we don't have any special sales. And then there is another pricing, which is high-low pricing. Regular prices that are higher than the everyday low price strategy, but then they're going to have sales quite often. And when they do have the sales, those prices are lower, and often they're significantly lower. And then psychological pricing. Pricing products at points that seem to indicate they are less expensive than what they really are. So you're getting into somebody's psyche and saying, I'm going to offer you this. It's not really cheaper, but you think it's cheaper. Well, we are at 6:15. And as I mentioned to you, I'm going to stop this part. It's going to take me about 5 minutes or so, but just to be on the safe side, we'll come back at 6:25. I will end this, we'll get this set up, and then we'll come back and do chapters 15 and 16. So please come back at 6:25. Thank you.